Scrap station. Oh no! Ugh! Alright, well, if Scrap Station was to appear, it would be with a mirror matchup. In the top position, it is Mixu. In the right position, it is Dark. Classic 12 o'clock, 1:30 o'clock positions. Now this was an actual original map. Some of the other maps weren't, I think, part of the very first map pool. They were part of the second one, or even maybe the third one. I'm gonna say Ohana was later. Toss would have won that easily with a couple disruptors and storms. Yeah, Carol probably, would have loved to have those. Jed TM, 5 gifted subs. Everyone's been so nice today. Thank you guys for the support. Alright, so let's talk about Scrap Station. So Scrap Station, like I said, one of the very first maps alongside Xel'Naga. And it's probably the worst one. I'd have to play it again to say really what's worse. But it's not good. It's not good. It is a U-shaped map, which we're kind of used to. It's blocked in the middle, so you don't just get this access path for free, but you can break down the rocks. You have an island base with nothing particularly useful about it, and definitely taken more by Terran than anyone else. And then the gold base, I remembered correctly, is in the bottom side, with the Xel'Naga as well. And then every other base is pretty normal, but again, note, it's not, despite it being what looks like a large map, you really look at the scaling of the bases, and you're like, that's actually not that big. And it's not, although it was definitely one of the longer rush distances, because you would have to go through here, initially. But what was a modest rush distance, might be okay in today's time, is made up for by just absolutely abhorrent placement of things. What is the natural? It's like you live in the US and you gotta go to Japan to get to the natural. You're like, what are you doing? What? And then, yeah, for anyone who wants to abuse air, which is, again, not generally Zerg, but, you'd have stupid battles like Medivacs and Banshees attacking between each other. Void Ray rushes could absolutely happen versus Zerg on this map in the good old days. And then if they didn't work, like, close to base, like main base to main base, you'd just be like, I'm just gonna run around this gigantic space in the back. You can't stop me. And I'm gonna just attack you from every location. Boom, boom, boom. And then you wouldn't be able to do anything. What are you gonna do? Get Corruptors against my Void Rays? Oh, you're so stupid. It was a good time. I played Terran, of course, but I mean, honestly, I don't think I really played a lot of Scrap Station. I do remember some games, but not a lot. I had such ladder anxiety, I didn't play 1v1. So even though I was playing Wings of Liberty almost from the beginning, not beta, I didn't play a lot of 1v1. I played a bunch of team maps. You throw me a team map from 2010, and I might recognize it. And I remember the builds I used. But I don't really remember playing 1v1 maps, because I was too scared to. And I think Scrap Station also became one of the most hated maps amongst the tournaments. The pros, so it didn't get played as often either. But it definitely had some games. it had some games. Third base. If this is America to Japan, this is Japan to Australia. You're just all over the world. And now your third bases are so close to each other. So, when we talk about Legacy of the Void, talk about default 3 bases. Imagine your default third base and ZVZ being this close to each other. That'd be terrifying. But we're not in default Legacy of the Void 3 base versus 3 base. 2 base is more the default. 2 base all-ins were still plentiful. Zerg would, need the third base. But even that might not be as saturated as we know it today. And in ZVZ, I mean, you could get away with 1 base, technically. The ZVZ build of choice from me was a really cheesy build. I was Terran for, like, the first 6 months, then I was Zerg for a year, then I was Terran again. When I was Zerg, I took this build from a guy named Force Strategy, and it was literally you wall your main, and you get to lay and build mutas. It's so bad. And yet it worked. So even 2 base could work. But, mutas should be on the docket here for anyone, because we are talking about I should probably swap the positions. We are talking about ZVZ on a map that has this gigantic airspace in the middle and are all around it. Dark, he had not been playing Wings of Liberty as much, actually. Dark had his pro career recognized in 2012, which was still Wings of Liberty, but he wasn't a very good player for the beginning years. And so it's very possible that he was either still bad or actually did not play on Scrap Station. But I think he would know Ling's good, Baneling's good, and that's exactly what Dark is doing. Dark is Dark, and he will kill you before you get to do anything. That seems to be what's happening here. Dark's like, I don't care if it's Wings of Liberty. I got a natural, I got a third, I didn't drone. Despite getting those things, these are larva production factories, and I'm going to kill you with Ling Baneling. Mixu would have such an advantage if those freaking Spire would pop. But not only is it only now building, it's only now finishing. The positioning of these bases. What I was getting to. Even though the rush distance is okay, as Mixu does tap out, you know, we do have Dark's main base reinforcements coming around town. Takes a long time. You have... Actually, this is actually a better choke than some other maps. But you still have so many bases to account for that are so far apart from each other. And the main and the natural being this far apart, I mean, you could try and defend here and here, I guess. But again, any current map, this would not look like this. You'd have a natural and a main, and the natural would have your choke, and it'd have a bunch of walling evolution chambers against this. But what option would you have on a map like this if you were facing someone who's going to Ling Baneling you, and you're trying to defend to Mutas? You'd Eva wall this, I guess, but then what do you do here? Eva wall that too? That requires 3 Evos at least, if not 4 actually. And then you'd make sure to have the creep there too, which means you're missing injects. It's just... If you get to Mutas, they're very abusive on this map, but it does make a lot of sense for Dark just to go ahead and kill the guy. Makes all the sense in the world. GG's. Playing Wings of Liberty again. And now we're on Ohana. On the bottom right it is Mixu, and the top left it is Dark, who's playing Protoss. Oh, how nice of the guy. Had some fun playing some ZVZ, did what he does best. Honestly, nothing changed in that department. He could have had a blindfold on, not even realize he was playing Scrap Station, and that still made a lot of sense. But now he's going to play Protoss on Ohana. Now, Ohana would have been almost certainly a map when Dark was a professional. Almost certainly. Because I already had someone find the Ohana years, and it was 2012-2013. So, Dark definitely played on Ohana. He definitely played against Immortal Sentry all-ins, and he probably even practiced as Protoss. Just to learn the other side, and you know, most pros are pretty good with all races. So it wouldn't surprise me if Dark did an Immortal Sentry all-in here. It'd be funny. It'd be cruel. It'd be mean to Mixu. But I would laugh. Dark thought about going for a Forge, I guess, and then realized it's too soon to go for a Forge, because he still had to build another probe. And then now he's going to go for a... he's going to block it. I think that was just a probe going down too soon. Spawning pool has to come down from Mixu. You could take the third. But it's really not... Whoopsie daisy. Really not ideal. Less ideal than ever. Good English. Alright, Forge does come down. Dark. First of all, he doesn't play Protoss, but it doesn't even matter. He's probably benefits him not to be maining Protoss right now. So he can try and figure out Wings of Liberty Protoss. It's too different. But even Geralt, I guess, could have figured out the Forge Fast Expand build a little faster. Good times. So Mixu is being heavily delayed on his expansion, and he really doesn't want to take the third here. He took it on Daybreak when he was pylon blocked. But I think one, his confidence against his opponent was much higher. Even though this is a, you know, it's on an old expansion and now Dark's playing an off race, Dark is still one of the scariest guys you go up against. And then I think also Daybreak, despite having probably a similar distance if the rocks are broken down. I don't even know if that's true, actually. But the point is the rocks are not broken down. Daybreak, you at least would be able to transfer your drones without them having to circle around and whatnot. So, whatever reason, he doesn't take his third as his natural. He does take 3 hatcheries. That is going to be the standard. But if you were to lose the third to a 2-base Protoss, it's not the end of the game like it would be. Generally. I guess it's kind of similar, actually. We've had games recently where the third dies and you still see a Zerg player win out. Like, if they don't know a DT rush is on the way, they'll lose the third, but then maybe able to still win. And that's kind of similar here, which is like, if you lose the third of the Zerg, it's not ideal. No one likes that. But because you do have more minerals and gas on your bases, you can limp along a little longer. Rocks do need to be broken down. You're already going to have to deal with force fields, and you don't want to have to deal with force fields and rocks. Dark has gone for Forge Fast Expands after a little hiccup on the opening building, and he might, again, go into the Immortal Sentry. You wouldn't know the exact build. No one would remember the exact build. Maybe Parting would remember the exact build, but even him, I don't think he would. It's been 12 years and 3 different games for that guy. Heart of the Swarm, Legacy of the Void, and then he was in Stormgate for a long time. Not a long time, but for an intense period of time. So I don't even think he would remember the build. But he could get closest to it, for sure. And Dark, I think he's going to do it. I'm just going to hope he does it so we can see how powerful it is. Mixu is going to get a scout into the main base and see your robo, but that's really normal. Let's talk about how many options were available in Wings of Liberty for Protoss. Oracles do not exist. So scratch that off the list. You do not go Stargate Opener into Void Ray, or into Oracle. You could go Stargate Opener into Void Ray or Phoenix, which was a thing, for sure. This Void Ray and or Phoenix would kill the Overlords. We see that occasionally still. And then you would probably cheese behind it on 2 bases. That's what Protoss did. Or you'd go Mass Void Ray or something. But that was your option with the Stargate. The Twilight Council option, I would say, was either for 2-base Blink or 2-base Charge, which still exists. And then you had the Robo, which could also go Sentry all in. It could also go into a macro game Colossus, I guess. But you'd be most scared of the Mortal Sentry all in, particularly because we're on Ohana. And Ohana has this choke, which we often, you know, I've been complaining on behalf of the players for these chokes that don't exist in some other maps, right? But it is a double-edged sword. Sometimes you want a wall. It would be the perfect thing to have a wall. You don't get a wall. Sometimes you absolutely do not want a wall, and you do not want a choke. You want to get a big surround, a big concave, and force fields and chokes ruin that. So this is the conundrum, is that the Protoss player gets a very straight shot from natural to third, because they just defend, you know, they're only 2 bases, and they don't worry about the third nexus, so they just defend this natural, and they're good to go. So they walk across the map. The Zerg player very rarely gets an opportunity to have an army that's really prepared for it. They could have a Ling Swell that could pop the force fields. As I've discussed previously, that was one of the goals, was to use a surplus of Lings to try and bait out force fields. And then you would do that, hopefully, as a Zerg player. And then the Protoss player would still have some force fields as they arrive to your front base. They could tear down your natural. Sometimes you'd walk into the natural. It'd be insane. They could walk in, kick the force field off before you collected your units on either side, and you'd just be like, "What? No, stop. That's not how that works." But it could happen. They could also just force field this and then go over to the third. And then as much as you're like, "Well, I killed the rocks, so I'm good, right?" Well, of course, they just put a couple of force fields down here. What are you going to do? You don't have Ravagers. So basically, Ohana, very divisible, right? You can just divide the reinforcement points and just cut them off, and then boom, third base is killed, and then you just contain them for a while. It's also a very straight shot, and it is, I think, just mostly abusable for force fields. Yeah, without Ravagers, man, this game is so different. So the game of Immortal Sentry all in is just stopping them from getting to chokes. Stop them from getting a force field central. So if you can do that, then you're golden. But if you let them close to your base where the chokes naturally are, then you're in so much trouble. But you can't get enough army to stop them from getting close. That's the conundrum. It might be like, I have the playbook here. Why does this sound so hard? Because it is difficult to get the appropriate number of units to kill this army before this army is hitting you. It's difficult. Ling run by was a good idea, but Dark is actually fully walled in. And your only hope is to, like I said, bait out those force fields. You're not going to get the kill if they know how to use force fields. They're also going to be wary of you baiting the force field, so there's going to be that little mind game, like force field or no force field. And unfortunately, right now, Dark is really showing a classic Soul Train, I would say. I don't know if it's the exact build. I'm not that in tune with the build, but it's much closer to what it was than what Geralt was doing. So many sentries, an almost comical amount of sentries for today's StarCraft, but really quite appropriate for Wings of Liberty. 13 sentries, guys. Guardian Shield, Force Field, blocking a significant chunk of roaches. Those roaches on the right could not touch anything. And then you still have so many force fields behind them. Gonna bait them through the choke here. I mean, the ideal situation for Protoss is to cut the army in maybe a quarter, so you kill it a quarter at a time. Half might be a little bit too much to chew in certain situations, and you don't want to just let the army through, obviously. But if you could cut off a quarter of the Zerg army every time you place down force fields, then they would be left with nothing by the time you're out of force fields. In the Zerg, is the opposite, right? They don't want any army trapped in those force fields, and they want to engage when all the force fields are gone. We are getting to a point where Mixu... Oh, shit! Oh my god. Remember I pointed out you could force field that main ramp if you just walked up, and that has happened before? Well, you could also do it if you just brought a War Prism in. Well, this was the most bullshit of bullshit things in the world. This was the most bullshit Protoss could ever be aiming. The War Prism Sentry Force Field of the Zerg. It's indefinite. 4 sentries is indefinite force fields. We do have an attempted collapse on the remaining army off the left side. A good idea from Mixu. What I was about to say was that he's getting to the point of having so many units that he could probably go for a surround. And that's what he tries to do here, but even though he does take out that army, he's losing his main base. He literally cannot do a thing about this. There are no options. The only option is to hope the Protoss player forgets the force field. Just kidding. So they just what to do when he's like dangling a little piece of meat over to a starving man. Like, I'm gonna forget. Nah, I'm not gonna forget. Yeah, he's kidding. And so you're pretty screwed. So, but now you're like, well, it's 2 base versus 2 base. It's not the worst thing in the world, right? Well, you did also lose production and spawning pool. Evolution chamber goes down. 2 bases means you can survive for a long time, but it also means your opponent can survive for a long time. So, you're like, well, he's also in a bad position. It's like, well, not exactly. He's rebuilding Sentries and Immortals, which are pretty much the exact thing you want against roaches. Oh, he forgot a force field? I think he forgot either Mr. Force Field or he intentionally let those roaches up, because that was also fine. He had so many zealots up here. Summoning Claws, to be fair, was an option, but it hasn't researched yet. But if that was an option, he would have used it immediately. Then nothing would have been terrible. Instead, everything is terrible. Burrowed roaches are going to try and take an engagement, of which they will do okay with, actually. I'd say save the sentries, yep. Let the zealots try their best against what's left. And that's exactly what Dark does. Not going to really be able to save the zealots against speed roaches here, so... Cut your losses. Mixer realizing that was the intent, does do a little bit of micro. Wants to have the biggest army he can possibly have, right? Right now, his biggest benefit is army. He had started to get to an uncontrollable amount of roaches, and just prior to his probably plan to engage, that's when the War Prism hit his main. But he has a large army. There's no doubt about that. And that means he doesn't have to build army right now, first of all. He can counterattack and scare Dark off of the third, second of all. And then fourth of all, he has tunneling claws. So he could also really try and start to plan some sneak attacks. So if Dark thinks, okay, I'm going to bust out of here, follow up 2 base all in, force field immortal, tunneling claws would absolutely change that dynamic. Not that he couldn't win with the army that he had, but it'd be much harder because the force field would be pretty much ineffective. Mixu is going to double up on the good things to have against force fields, which is tunneling claws and infestors. Infestors don't break force fields, but they do... I want to say 2 or 3 fungals kills a sentry. And you can chain fungals really easily. So that's a pretty big problem. Dark might try and move out and then inadvertently get stuck in place. He's going to scout the infestor. He's going to know how good they are, because he definitely was abusing them back in the day. This warp prism action is going to continue for a little while. Obviously the fungal could hit it, but I don't know how many fungals it takes to kill a warp prism. The sentries, they do pop pretty quickly, but a warp prism, who knows? And without queens, spores, corruptors, no vipers, not even the ravagers to hope to try and kill the warp prism, a warp prism can fly around for quite a bit. Tunneling claws get roaches under force fields, just to make that super clear for anyone. So for instance, right here, there we go. Yep, he can try and escape with it. Now, obviously, with an observer, this is why tunneling claws isn't some type of magic cure-all. Even though they negate the force fields, if the observer is there, you're not going to spend 10 seconds moving roaches that are slower when they're burrowed underneath the force field, dying to the immortal shots. So it's the balancing act. It's the back and forth between the two. Dark has to respect the tunneling claws and the infestors in particular. And then Mixu has to respect the pure might of the army of the Protoss, and still have to rely on good engagements, surrounds, and good fungals. Beautiful fungals! Which really didn't mean anything, because any fungal was a beautiful fungal, because they were all easy to use. We are reaching the extent of the bases for each team, I guess. 5 on each side of the map. Not a whole lot, but better with the increased minerals and gas. And then if you want any further bases, you're going to have to steal your opponents. There's no middle bases here. Thanks. Thank you, Guido. Dark has moved on to additional supply, additional technology. He's gotten 8 immortals. Good lord. And he's getting Storm, actually. Which, again, Colossus are a totally fine option. But Storm is going to give you High Templars that can feed back the Infestors as well. So, definitely see why that's a good option. And we're not going to see Banelings here. Although I would love to see more experimentation with Banelings and Wings of Liberty. I think that's not something that a lot of people think of when they think of Wings of Liberty. Because Roaches are so dominant and Brightwood Infestor was so dominant. But Leenock, someone brought up Leenock earlier. Leenock was one of the guys who was definitely abusing a lot of Baneling play before everyone else was. He was doing Baneling drops versus Protoss, which is really cool. So he would load up his Overlords with Banelings, and then he would just literally run his Overlords over the army of fragile sentries. And that was a very classic matchup for a little while. Leenock's mass Overlord drops versus, like, Naniwa, for instance. They had a little bit of a rivalry for a while. And I always cheered for Leenock, because Naniwa's a dick. But, anyway. Leenock, he was a little genius. I feel like he's maybe forgotten a little bit in time, especially because he doesn't play anymore, but I always like cheering for Leenock. Let's load it in the Prism. Good question. We got 4 Stalkers. They were the harassment squad, so we're not ferrying around the High Templars yet. I don't know if Dark plans to or not. It's more effective versus Terran to ferry them around, but still pretty useful against Zerg. Just the ability to position the High Templar where you need them most to get the most effective storms could be used against Zerg, of course. Fleet Beacon is on the way for Dark. Wow, he's going to go into carriers. Well, Mixu is go... Oh, he's going to go on the mothership. Mixu is going for a Greater Spire. This game did not end with the Immortal Sentry all in. Got a little awkward. Dark couldn't expand. Mixu was trying to recover from losing the main. But apparently the awkwardness is over. Both players well on their way to a late game. Mixu going for Bruthan Infestor. Dark Only option at this point is going to Mothership and carriers, sure. But Mothership. Force Field's gonna come down, block out the Infestors in particular, and the High Templars doing a great job providing extra damage. An extra force field, if you will. Do not cross this line if storms are down. At the same time, Dark sent in a couple of Zealots. The Warp Prism drops off the Stalkers, and it looks like a queen or two have died. The Warp Prism will continue harassment as Mixu desperately returns home to clear up his bases. He did have a surplus of money, but that was past tense. Using it in rebuilding the drones, building expensive corruptors, and of course, still waiting on that Greater Spire so they can turn into Broodlords. The Broodlords are on the way, but so is the Mothership. Will we see an Archon toilet? Toilet, toilet, toilet. It's really a shame that the esports world as we know it has lost the ability to chant toilet in Twitch chat. For good reason. Not some inane reason. It's really just a sad state of affairs when esports is going so poorly. We can't chant toilet. But I think we might see one. I don't know, that's a lot of Immortals. We might not get there. 9 Immortals. Oh, well. Okay, we got some neural parasites. That's always a good thing to have. However, the Infestors were focused. The storms did come down, and it looks like Dark is not going to be caught in that position. The Immortals are getting weakened, though, so I don't know. And the Broodlords have appeared, right? So you don't know if that's going to be 9 Broodlords or just the 3. And if it was just the 3, and it is, maybe Dark could have pushed for a little bit longer, but why play with 5? They're playing Wings of Liberty, dude. This is Wings of Liberty. That's why I keep bringing up Wings of Liberty versus Liberty. Not just because I like talking about it. More specific this time. Yeah, I'm getting tax forms. Taxes! 8 more Infestors are on the way. Upgrades for melee and range, as the melee does affect the Broodling, by the way. The Archon Toilet is being created. We have our plunger ready to go. The Mothership's gonna have energy soon, and the Archons are ready. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna put the vortex down, and then you put the Archons in the vortex, and then you have a good one. And what does Zerg do against it? It's a good question. They either try and kill the Mothership with Corruptors, which against all these Stalkers and Archons is kind of difficult, or they Neural Parasite it. And I do believe Neural Parasite was researched. It was indeed. Now, what else can you do against the Vortex, you might ask? It seems like a pretty powerful spell. You have to take the Mothership? That seems unfair. Well, there's this thing called spreading. And, you know, Zerg players, you know, a lot of StarCraft players, I guess, weren't really, like, on the ball about it for a while. So Motherships came in, Vortex the hell out of Broodlord Infestor. Oh my god, the Fungus. Oh my god, the Fungus wearing Templar. Oh, he's not gonna get another one though. Oh, he's so close! So the Focus Fire thing for the Broodlings killed a couple of High Templars, but 4 of them still exist. We got the Vortex down as well! It's the toilet without the Archons! Get in there! There it is. And the Broodlings are all types of clumped up, so the Archons will kill them. Only one will survive, and even that goes down. GG's. Dark will win with a good old-fashioned Archon toilet. He kind of looked like he was winning anyway, to be honest. But that was it. That was it. That was the good stuff. Mixu did not spread his Broodlords. But didn't take quite the perfect engagement. That was called... Well, that was called Vortex. I don't... That's literally the spell name. So in the final game here on Daybreak, and now Dark's gonna give us a TVZ. Thanks, Dark. Top right, Mixu. Bottom left, Dark. So Vortex from the Mothership was a spell that was abandoned in Heart of the Swarm, I believe. Pretty sure about that. And what it does is that it creates a vortex that sucks units into it, and it doesn't do any damage. But when everything pops out, everything is clumped. So first, it's, you know, just, it takes them out of the equation. It's crowd control. Then, all the units that pop out are clumped. And the Archons have splash damage, And so everything's clumped up. The Archons immediately get perfect Archon shots, and then everything dies. Either you take away the mothership somehow and don't have to deal with the vortex, or you do a good job splitting and preparing for the vortex on the side of the Zerg. And I don't think Mixu was actually as well prepared as he could have been for the late game. Despite getting to Broodlord Infestor, he had 8 Broodlords. Good amount of Infestors, but he didn't get to use them as well as I think he could have. You could create more infested Terran walls. Although that's also something the Storms are good for, by the way. Storms are actually kind of necessary against Mass Infestor. Not just for feedbacks, but for storming the Terrans. And then, so that could buy you some time. Then obviously you fungal. You stop the Archons from ever reaching the Vortex. And then also just, you know, kind of baiting Vortex, right? If it catches 2 Broodlords, 4 Infestors, and 6 Roaches, it's not what the Vortex wanted to do. The Vortex wanted to catch literally every single unit. And so there is, like, this Vortex appeared, you know, I think people give, like, Kilokaki credit for one of the first professional Archon toilets. Zerg players just like, whoa. And so they never split, they never prepared for it, then everyone was like, well, we gotta learn how to deal with this. And after a time, you saw a lot more stalemates in late game PvZ, where both players were incredibly terrified of each other, which is not so different from today. But today, it's, you know, the final battle, which way does it go? In yesteryear, it was, does the toilet work or not? It was really dependent on that. So now we get to see some Terran, which is pretty cool. Mixu still sticking with Zerg, obviously. Those 3 hatch on Daybreak. Daybreak being, I would dare to say, our first macro, true macro, more modern map, despite its natural choke not looking like a modern map. Dark is going to go for a factory expand by the looks of things, which, you know, you definitely had Wings of Liberty start on one base all the time, but you did have it by, like, mid Wings of Liberty, have it be natural expansion, anticipated, expected. Anything else is kind of cheesy. So we're kind of dipping a little bit more into that, but totally valid for Wings of Liberty earlier years. And the Marines trying to scout out for the Overlord. Mixu doing a good job hiding it, saving it, not going to lose it. Very good job, actually. And he's going to confirm it is a factory expand. Is the mothership's ability named Vortex or Black Hole? Because I feel like it might have been Black Hole in beta, and they changed it. Sure. Anyway, Hellion is on the way, but a singular is kind of odd, and he will change that over. And we might say Hellion Banshee. It might be totally normal. As far as the classic Terran things to do, I can't list any that are as common and memey as the Archon Toilet, the Immortal Sentry All-In, or Broodlord Infestor. That's not to say that Terran was this horribly underpowered race and woe is me, but just I don't think there was anything as iconic. Yeah. 2-base tank pushes were good, but again, I don't really think they belong in the same category as those other terms I've been using. But that might be what we see here from Dark. You saw some mech from Nicorak, which is nice, but a good old Marine tank push could be really classic to see. Widowmines do not exist in this game. Liberators don't exist. Hellbats don't exist. Cyclones don't exist. That covered most. Overlord does eventually die, funnily enough. I don't think that one actually... Was that the Scouting Overlord? Or does that accidentally move in? Anyway, Hellions get into the main, and that is problematic. Mixu was not anticipating a little rush in here. He does not have speed. He has been delaying speed in a decent amount of his games. And just coincidentally, one more time, he delays it. And he's getting the box by some Hellions. 6 drones going down, 7 drones, perhaps some more. 3rd base now under fire. I was listening all the Terran units that aren't here, by the way. No one caught that. Reapers wouldn't do original damage to buildings. They do still have the building attack, but I believe they were nerfed in damage. So we haven't seen them anyway. But I would like, you know, if we could have these this again, I would like to see some Terrans sign up and do some Reaper shenanigans. It is Hellion Banshee, by the way. Although whether or not it's going to be bio. Oh, he's supply blocked. Aha! I don't play Terran very often, do ya? Do ya? No. No, but I think this might be bio pretty late on the tech lab. For Stim. Hellions are getting a great deal done. 17 drones have gone down. Oh, no, I didn't know about the Banshees. Oh. Oh, Mixu is getting... He's kind of getting bopped by a couple of basic units. That Overlord died just shy of seeing the Starport tech lab. Maybe if he wasn't under so much stress with the Hellions, he would have double-checked and said, okay, that could be... I should build a Spore Crawler, but... That's more benefit to harassment. Not just the direct damage, but the indirect damage as well. Getting your opponent to get frazzled and forget things. That kind of seems to have happened here from Mixu, who's now on the road to recovery. Trying to rebuild his drones. And because Dark is probably... I would guess his worst race is Terran, just because most of the time we see players off-race Protoss. If they off-race. I don't know what about. I don't know why that is, but it is what it is. And so maybe the same for Dark. I don't know. But if that's the case, then Dark is worse at Wings of Liberty. Everyone is. And he's worse at Terran. I would give Mixu's comeback chances 20%, 25%. You know, if this was Legacy of the Void, Dark Zerg, it'd be 0%. It'd be nothing, nada. But unfortunately, yeah, he is still dealing with it. He's still getting damage done by the Banshees. That was just classic Terran units getting the jump on Mixu once again. They had done so previously. It's sometimes perhaps getting caught up with all the questions of the version you're playing. You just forget some of the basics, and I think that happened to Mixu a couple of times today. You know, if he had gotten spores and he had gotten walls and he was not taking any more damage from Hellion Banshee, I mean, he was back up 57 workers, you know. I think I could see a possible timeline. Dark, late to bio, he's not very good handling it, good old fungals. Like, I could have absolutely seen a scenario where Mixu recovered, but taking more damage from the harassing units, yeah, he's of course going to tap out. So that's a 3-0. Dark wins, playing every single race. And we get a good dose of nostalgia, casting some Wings of Liberty. Obviously, we're not going to see top-tier Wings of Liberty play until people play this a decent amount of time, but I don't know what their plans are for it. Personally, I'd still like to see more of it. I'm not going to say indefinite Wings of Liberty tournaments, but I would say I would like to see more of it. And it'd even be fun to see some of the different time periods of these expansions experimented with as well. Which is never going to be a perfect science, because some things were resulting from changes. And some things were resulting from just people getting better and people experimenting, right? So you could go back to the patch where Reapers did a million damage to hatcheries, just because that was the patch. But you can't really go back to Wings of Liberty and say, like, stop doing Brood Infestor. That was kind of more of a, everyone figured it out and how to get to it and how to perfect it. Although the Queen buff did help with it, for sure. Anyway, you can see more. And more Terrans, too. I don't know if I'd sign up for it. I mean, starting with 6 workers sounds like a real bore. But maybe even signing up for it could be fun. If it is going to happen, it should be Monday nights. That's this is like part of kind of the Stegosaurus, Pig Stegosaurus, something, all that stuff. All those fine people putting on some weekly cups. So if you do want to catch it, that would be your best bets. They might be underneath the title of Monday Night Weeklies. No, that's TKL's one. See, I don't know what their plans are for this next one, but yeah. I'm glad they did it. Thank you very much. Hold on. Stego Cups featuring Pigosis, I think. Pig and Artosis also chipped in. So thanks to those guys. All right, GG's. Well, that was fun. I could talk a lot about stuff that usually no one cares about.